People of Speaker's Corner, I want to share a story with you. This is a story which will help you sort out your life. This is a story which will explain the crazy world that we live in. And what I want to start with is this. Imagine there is a caveman, and this caveman, he lives hundreds of thousands of years ago. And this caveman, he finds out there is a tree, and on this tree there is plenty of fruits. And this caveman, he thinks to himself, I want to survive, I want to reproduce, and I have just discovered this tree. But then he thinks to himself, if I go and tell the other people about this tree, then I will not have food to survive and reproduce. Now let me ask you something. Is this selfish trait of this caveman something you would praise or something you would hate? Most of us here would say no. Being selfish, thinking only of yourself is not a good trait. It's not something we want to do. Yet today we live in a world where we are taught a Darwinian worldview, where we are taught that we are all selfish deep down inside, and we're purely there to propagate our DNA and survive. What I want to do today is to show you this is a baseless worldview. What I want to begin with is this. Many people today, they think they are rational, they think they are scientific, and they think that they can also call themselves humanists, and they can call themselves Darwinists. But this is a contradiction. The reason why it is a contradiction is because Darwinism teaches you are nothing but a selfish replicator. You are there to survive against all odds, and it's all against all. But if you look at our society today, we have morals, we have codes of right and wrong, we have civilization, we have hospitals. Now what are hospitals? Are hospitals proof of the selfish gene of a Darwinian worldview? Or are hospitals proof that we believe in survival of the fittest, or that we believe in survival of the unfittest? Why is it that our tax money goes towards hospitals and towards helping the poor? If the selfish gene idea is true, Richard Dawkins writes in this book that the very purpose of our existence, the very purpose of our rationale is to propagate, and we are deep down selfish. But you and I both know this is not true about human beings. We care about each other. We give charity. We have art. We have reason. We have rationale. We care for others. We have empathy. So don't be deluded into thinking that this worldview is the correct worldview. Let me tell you what is the correct worldview. The correct worldview is to love for others what you love for yourself. That is the correct worldview. The correct worldview is to believe that empathy and sympathy and altruism is not a survival mechanism. It is something ingrained in the human being. It is part of human nature. And where does this come from? Does this come from Richard Dawkins? Does this come from Darwin? No, it doesn't. They teach the exact opposite. They teach that we are selfish beings. But like the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said 1400 years ago, love for mankind what you love for yourself. This is the worldview I'm here to share today. And I'm here to show that this worldview is incorrect. And how do we know it's incorrect? What evidence do we have to show it's incorrect? Because if Darwinism is true, and every single aspect of the human being including his behavior, including his mind and body, are products of the selfish gene, purely there to survive and propagate, then why do we have such thing as kindness, as empathy, as sympathy? No atheist here will even bother trying to challenge it, because they know there is no answer. We know throughout our lives.
Understood the book.
We know throughout our lives.
The book is not.
Mate, let him finish his talk. He's getting up to speak to everyone in public in general. He will address it afterwards, I promise.
I shall speak when I want to speak.
That's fine, but you're interrupting everyone here. Come on.
You've misunderstood.
Come on, pal.
Well, conscious, don't hit me. Don't do that, pal.
Did I hit
Tap
you?
me, don't tap me. Alright?
Why have I
come on.
misrepresented this book?
It's not a conscious selfishness. This is the essence of the gene is propagation.
Right, so why have I
I
misrepresented
read the book maybe 25 years ago. I can't remember exactly. You're going to pick out pages.
Right, so can you tell me why I have misrepresented this book?
Because it's the essence of the gene. All it cares about is propagation.
Yeah.
And living on. Living on. Propagation and living on.
So how have I misrepresented this book? You're saying that.
Yeah, but you're saying it's human beings are selfish. What it's saying is human beings are selfish. It doesn't say that.
It says
The
we are there.
genetic level, all that genes care about is replacing. It doesn't mean that we as human beings are necessarily selfish.
So why do we help others when it doesn't help our survival
said.
and reproductive values? Why do
Well, because we live in a civilized world.
right? But
And-
how does that make sense under Darwinism? Aren't we there to
Wait a minute, what are you
survival
saying
of the
under
fittest?
You keep bringing up Darwinism, which puzzles me.
Right.
What is your relation? How do you correlate it with Darwinism?
Okay, didn't Darwin come up with the idea that we are a product of a blind mechanical force called natural selection?
Yeah.
And every single thing that we do has been not designed but it's adapted because of our environment to help us survive and reproduce. That's Darwinism,
Because of the
right?
environment.
Right, exactly. Have I said anything wrong?
But you keep bringing selfishness into it. Darwin never mentioned the word selfishness
Right.
in any of his books.
So tell me this. Why is it that in this book which you said you've read, it says,
When was the book published? I read it when it was published.
you read it when it was published?
Yeah.
This has been republished in 2006.
No, not republished, originally published. You can find it on the...
1976.
Well, there you are. 30 years ago?
Yeah. So this is
No,
what it says
40
in your
years
book.
ago.
This is what it says in Richard Dawkins' book. The preservation is our ultimate rationale for our existence.
Yes. The
you agree
rationale
with
for
that?
our existence.
Is what? The
It's
preservation.
not a conscious...
Wait. Hang on. Do you believe that we are there purely to survive and reproduce?
Yes.
Right, so you're not disagreeing with me. That's all I'm
Yeah,
saying.
that's in
And what
essence is the reason for our existence.
but why do you believe that?
Because it's
When
true,
the
every
evidence is
animal on the
against-
planet is the same. All they're there for is to propagate, have some young, and bring them up, and then they can die.
Okay, if that's true, then tell me this. Why do we have hospitals where we take care of the unfit?
Because we're
How does that
civilized.
fit into Darwinism?
That's because, nothing to do with Darwinism. That's because we're civilized individuals and we care for people who are getting sick.
Right?
How's
doesn't
that
fit.
got to do
No,
with Darwinism?
That fits under an Islamic worldview. That doesn't fit under your worldview. Under your worldview, we're there
Do
purely
we
to
not have
survive and
hospitals in
reproduce.
the country?
We're there purely to survive and reproduce under your worldview. Under my
That
worldview, that
is in
makes sense.
essence why we're here. Right?
So the essence of why we're here is to propagate our genes.
Yes.
Right. That's exactly what I'm saying, so you're not disagreeing with me.
Yeah, but
and what I'm saying is that idea is nonsense. And you're not giving me a good reason why it's true.
How is it nonsense? I don't follow.
How is it nonsense? So let me explain to you again. We have empathy. We have sympathy.
Yeah, but they're
we have
all-
altruism. Hang on
they're
a second.
all-
We have kindness. How does that make sense under a Darwinian worldview?
Because we have grown into become civilized human beings. You see the examples of our civilization all around you.
Right.
We're not living in the jungle anymore.
Sure. But how come we are selfish, like the selfish gene teaches us we should be?
The selfish
Why do we take care of others?
Is not a conscious level. The only thing, what he's saying is, as I recall, 30, 40 years ago when I read it, is that in essence, genetics wants to do is pass on, because we are not here, we're only here for a relatively short amount of time. No, we have to pass it on, because otherwise when we die the population of the world would die out as well. Same as every other creature. Creatures go around and they mate with other creatures. They don't know why they're doing it. They just do it because it's a natural and it passes on the genes.
Now let me just ask you a question. Richard Dawkins says in his book, that from a selfish gene point of view, it makes sense when a mother, her child is adopted by someone else, she should not be sad, because she can have more children and pass on her genes. Now if that is true from a Darwinian worldview, why is it that motherly love is not like that? Because if you go up to a mother and you say, "Mother, why do you love your child?" she is not going to say, "Because my child is carrying my genes." That's the last answer a mother's going to give. And what I'm trying to show you, wait one second, what I'm trying to show you is Darwinism is falsified by human behavior. Human behavior doesn't fit into a Darwinian picture. The way that we act with each other. It makes no sense.
When you say Darwinian, do you mean Darwin or do you mean somebody else?
I mean the whole package. I mean neo-Darwinism, I mean Richard Dawkins, I mean Ernst Mayr, all of them.
Darwin knew nothing about genes. He didn't know anything. He knew about the mechanism. He explained natural selection. But he didn't know how it came about. He admitted he didn't know.
Hang on a second. Two things here. Number one, Mendel did send him his paper about genes. Whether Darwin read it or not is the point of dispute. Secondly, Darwin believed we are there to survive and we are there to struggle against all others, right? And he believed that life was one big struggle, all against all, right? T.H. Huxley, Darwin, all of them believed in this. But if you look at human behavior, me and you both know, we cooperate. We help those that can't help us back. And this makes no sense under a Darwinian worldview. Why would I help someone? Wait, hang on a second. Just answering this very simple question.
For hundreds of thousands of years,
let me ask you a quick question.
Where do we live?
Wait, hang on.
We lived in small tribes of 30, 40 people.
Hang on a second. Why would I, under your worldview, and I'm going to give you time to answer this, would I help someone who I know they cannot add to my survival or reproductive value?
To you.
Right? You can't say kin selection because they're not relating to me.
No.
You can't say reciprocal altruism because they're not going to help me.
Right.
I want to know from your worldview.
We've evolved over hundreds of thousands of years living in small tribes, 30, 40 people. And when it got bigger than that, they broke off to form another. And that's how people spread around the world, basically, small tribes. If we didn't help, we realised that we have to help one another to survive.
I don't disagree with that.
The males went out hunting, the women stayed behind and helped one another.
I don't disagree with that. I agree.
That's answering your question.
I agree people had to cooperate to survive. I don't disagree with that at all. What I'm saying is the reason why they cooperated was not only for survival. It's because there's something beyond survival. There's something beyond reproduction. Human beings are not just survival machines. According to what you just said, the reason why they cooperated was to survive. But my question which I asked you is a different question. So you answered a question which I didn't ask. I asked, if I am to help someone who gives me no survival value and no reproductive value, how does that make sense under your world?
Well, that's evolved as civilization has expanded and become more sophisticated.
Religion inspired it.
But things evolve according to their survival value.
Right? No, not necessarily now. I mean, now we have such things as charities.
Right. And that makes no sense under your world.
Yeah, but we're talking about the world we live in now. We have charities and we keep people alive in hospitals.
Aren't these facts which go against Darwinism? Why do we help people that can't help us back?
Because of the fact, as I said, we've evolved in small communities where we've had
If we evolve purely to survive and reproduce, right? And deep down, hang on a second. I'm going by Darwinism as according to Richard Dawkins. If we are there purely as individuals to survive and reproduce, why do we help each other? Why do we have higher reasoning capacity?
Because
higher reasoning capacity makes no sense.
Because they help us. They help
Exactly,
us,
that's
they
my point.
reciprocate.
That's my point.
And the small tribes,
That's my
they
point.
reciprocate.
That's my
or
point.
reciprocated.
Right. But I asked you a different question. I asked, they give me no reciprocal value. So you keep answering a question I didn't ask.
Are we talking about the tribal world we lived in or now?
We're talking about the question I asked you. There is an individual over there who gives me no survival value and no reproductive value. How does it make sense under an
Yeah,
atheistic
because we now
Darwin
have
point
the
of view?
luxury of going beyond mere survival. You know, I mean, I haven't worked for many years, but I can live quite well.
So you're
A couple of hundred years ago, you couldn't have done that. Unless you were very rich, you couldn't have done that.
But that's proof against Darwinism. You're just falsifying Darwinism through your experience.
No. But at the animal level, which is where most people live, other than us as animals, you know, Homo sapiens, I'm talking about creatures that live in the wild, they live the same way that they've always lived.
But you're not answering my question. My question is, there's facts, hard facts about the real world, which go against Darwinism. And one of them...
Well, how should we operate in it? If it's... Imagine for a moment in your eyes that it is a Darwinian world. How would we operate now?
It'll be all against all. There'll be no
civilization.
Hang on, I'll let you answer. Let me answer. There'll be no charity. There'll be no hospitals. There'll be survival of the fittest. People will be killing each other. People will be stealing each other's resources. This is a true Darwinian worldview. But we don't see that. And we're civilized. So that shows you that Darwinism is not...
Even Richard Dawkins said he would not advocate a Darwinian...
Of course he wouldn't. No one wants to.
Because there is no charities, there is no helping, but that is the world that we've evolved in. But
this is what
millions, hundreds of thousands of millions of years.
Look, this is what Dawkins says. Right? We are built as gene machines and cultured as mean machines. But we have the power to turn against our creator. Now he believes the creator of the human being is the selfish gene. That's the base unit. And what I'm arguing today is that's actually nonsense. To believe that we are a product of a hang on. To believe we are a product of a blind mechanical force,
which we are,
over eons of time. No. I'm going to explain to you why it doesn't make any sense, and I want you to answer it. Over eons of time, we evolved through blind natural selection. Then what reason do we have to trust the mind if our mind is there to give us survival value, not truth value? Because evolution is about survival, it's not about truth.
Trust the mind in what way?
Okay. If we are there purely to survive and reproduce,
at an essential level we are, right? I mean, it's like, it's the hierarchy of needs. God, this is going back a long time. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The basic level is food and drink, the next level is shelter and clothing, and so on and so forth. Once we've got all those things, we aspire to greater things. And that's the level we've reached.
All you're doing is you're reinforcing what I just said.
No, I'm
you're
not.
breaking everything down in terms of need.
If we had no
that's
food...
what you just did. You just brought up Maslow's needs, right?
Yes, Maslow's needs, yeah.
And what I was saying is, needs, survival and reproduction is not the reason why human beings cooperate. But according to your worldview, that's the only reason why they cooperate.
No, we do cooperate. We live in a more sophisticated world now, and it's become essential. No man is an island. We have to cooperate to flourish.
It doesn't make sense under your worldview. It makes sense under my worldview. That there is such a thing as true empathy.
So where are you saying it? Are you saying it's some gift from, some deity? Then? Is that what you're saying?
So look, it boils down to this. Someone like yourself believes that we are just an accident of nature, right? And you believe that you can claim you're an accident of nature, yet you think it's a rational statement, but do you think it's a rational statement to claim that your brain from which you make conclusions came by accident? Do you not see a contradiction in that?
We have a brain, much more evolved brain, an intelligent brain than other primates, but they have brains too, right? I mean, if you take one of the few other creatures in the world that have self-consciousness. That's the orangutan, the gorilla, and the chimpanzee. If they look in a mirror, they recognise the fact that it's a reflection, it's not another creature.
Hang on. We can't have a discussion if you're going to bring assumptions as facts. Right?
What's the assumption?
The assumption is that we're linked to the orangutans and the chimpanzees.
Well, we are.
No, that's an assumption. What reason do you have to believe that? That is a fact.
What?
What reason do you have to believe that?
You went. I'm not insulting you here. You're not being educated. You're delusional. The evidence overwhelmingly.
Hang on a second.
The DNA.
Hang on. Let me just make, and I know there's no rules in Speaker's Corner, but let me just make a little suggestion. Assertions and assumptions are not arguments. So when I ask you, can you give me evidence that we're linked to other primates? Hang on a second. You can't just say, are you not educated? Have you not studied?
I just didn't understand
hang on
how you said, it stunned me that you say we're not even linked to the orangutan.
For you to claim something which is an assumption and to claim this is a fact, all I'm asking for is evidence. That's all.
The fact is, the evidence is the DNA.
Right.
Now, since we've been able to profile the DNA and compare it with the DNA of it, look, he's laughing. Amazing. With a chimpanzee and the gorilla and the orangutan, we can see on the scale of life where they came. We can see where we broke off from them with a common ancestor about 7 million years ago.
Hang on a second. You're saying because the DNA of the humans and the chimpanzees is similar, we must have a common ancestor.
Yes.
Do you know that's a logical fallacy? You're assuming correlation is causation.